All right, there she goes. Excellent. All right, so we're recording now. So yeah, let's get started. Let me turn off the very pleasant elevator music. Oh, and that was an interesting surprise. But yeah, basically, welcome to the first official pre-hackathon workshop of nwHacks 2022. Sorry, my bad. It's been a while. So my name's Kevin, and I'm going to be your workshop host today. And today's topic is going to be on accessible development and how we can kind of make the web a better place. So we're joined here. Our sort of crew for today is, I'm not sure, I think they're in the call, but if they're not, no worries. We have a bunch of other people here to help. So that's me. I'm Kevin. I'm currently a fifth year computer science major at UBC, and within nwPlus, my role is as the dev director. Joining us today are Anne Guo, who's a fifth year business and computer science major. And she's a project manager for nwPlus, so she helps sort of like manage all the dev projects here. And last but definitely not least, we have Phoenix, who is a third year CPEN student, and she is one of our new hires for developer this year. So that's sort of our crew. And if you have any questions or anything, feel free to message in the Discord channel. I think it's should be visible, and it's called Accessible Dev Banter. So yeah, if you have any questions there, feel free to message there or just talk. So yeah, let's talk a little bit more about me and sort of what we're doing here today. So to give some context into how I got my sort of start into accessible development, let's rewind the clock back to sort of 2020 when I was doing my first co-op. So this was at Vidyard, which was a company in Ontario. And what we sort of did was business-to-business video hosting solutions and analytics. Short way of saying it is basically YouTube for businesses. So if you were a salesperson or a marketer and you want to like source a lead or something, then you could send a video instead of like a cold call, email, or telephone. So that was sort of the premise of the business, not that it's super relevant. And there, alongside doing like the regular roles of a software engineer, I was working a lot on sort of accessibility tasks and tickets. So during my course of the first 4 months there, I learned about color contrast issues, screen readers, and how to sort of design your apps to be responsive to those, keyboard navigation, and ARIA labels. So we'll go over all of these in today's presentation. But if you have any questions about these afterwards, feel free to message, and happy to chat about that. So I did that. And if you remember, 2020 was kind of a weird year. So 2020 was actually when COVID hit. So I had packed up all my bags and I flew across the country and was living my best life out in Waterloo, to be specific. And in March 2020, that was when the pandemic started, I guess. And we got our kind of mission or our issue to work from home from then on. So what happened was the co-op I had lined up after Vidyard actually fell through as a result of the pandemic. So Vidyard was kind enough to extend my sort of contract for another 4 months. And that motivation was to build out a automated end-to-end test suite. So this was basically a automated test suite that would run every morning, and it would check for bugs and errors in the platform, and then also check for, it would also perform an initial accessibility audit. So you have to give us a quick overview of like what was wrong and what type of violations we were making in terms of accessibility. So this is relevant because not only is it like good to have your web apps be accessible, but at the time there was a pretty hefty fine if you weren't. So the image there, the Ontario Accessibility for Ontarians with Disabilities Act, they had a compliance deadline of, I think, June 2021, so about a year after the time I was at Vidyard. And basically for every day that your website had like some egregious accessibility violations, they would fine you like, I think it was either $5,000 or 50 grand per day, something like that. But anyways, if you're a business, you don't want that to be happening to you. So not only is there a business context to this, but there's also like just being accessible. So to wrap it up, let's talk about some things that I am. So I am 22 years old. I think you lose track of your birthdays with COVID and stuff. I'm I think I'm graduating this year. Hopefully, if I pass all my classes, I'll be graduating in May. So I'm terrified of that, but also excited for the next bit. You'll also come to find out I am a dog enthusiast, but unfortunately, I don't have a dog. So those are kind of 3 quick facts about me. The one thing I am not, though, is an expert, or I would say even particularly like super knowledgeable about accessibility. There's like a whole range of things, and I've only scratched the bare surface of it. So take this sort of workshop as a guiding point to start your sort of journey or knowledge of accessibility. So that being said, I do know some things, and my goal is for you to learn something from this workshop. And then a quick disclaimer before we start getting into the content of the workshop, but a lot of this is inspired by the great docs on accessibility that MDN has published. So there's a link there if you want to do some more reading there. So before we delve into how we can develop accessibly, let's talk about what it is first. So W3C has a really good definition for this. The web is fundamentally designed to work for all people, whatever their hardware, software, language, location, or ability. So when the web meets this goal, it is accessible to people with a diverse range of hearing, movement, sight, and cognitive ability. And then a little link there to the actual documentation from W3C. Oh, I think someone's mic is on. Oh, that's all good. Nothing like a little Zoom hiccup to start off. And a little cool tidbit, you'll often hear the abbreviation of accessibility as ALI, where the 2 L's are an 11, and the 11 represents the 11 characters between A and Y in accessibility. So that's pretty cool. Let's talk about motivations as to why. Making a web app accessible not only provides access to all users, regardless of any impairments they might have, but it also improves the everyday user's experience and the quality of the app. So here are some examples. First off, if you are a power user, you might be familiar with how you can hit tab in an input form. So if you're like doing online shopping and you're doing checkout, instead of having to type out your name and then go to your mouse and then go to next field, you can just hit tab to go to the next one. Maybe this isn't called power use. Maybe this isn't exactly the definition of a power user, but that's an example of how keyboard navigation makes life easier. Color contrast for easily readable text. So even for those without some form of color blindness, having easily readable text is easier for us to read, and it's also like more legible and easier to read quicker. Also page layout for comprehension of the site. So we're very used to this because this is a standard, but imagine if all websites didn't have like bolded or larger font sizes, it'd be really hard to sort of figure out the hierarchy of a site and navigate it effectively. So now that we've covered the what and why towards accessible development, we can talk about how we can move towards that point. So while this is not an exhaustive list, in my opinion, to develop in an accessible manner includes building an experience that is functional for the following. So we have hearing impaired users. Sorry, I'll go back to this before we go to the next point. But an example of this is if you have a hearing impairment and you maybe can't watch a video and listen to the audio, having subtitles is an example of how you can make it accessible for those users. Next up, we have visually impaired users. So this ranges from those who have to rely on screen readers to navigate the web. So we'll be also kind of exploring screen readers, and I think we'll actually try it out, barring any issues with Zoom. We have color blindness as well. So back to the point of like color contrast. Sightedness. So this is just like nearsightedness. If you can't see, like if the fonts are too close or too similar, then it's gonna be too hard to tell the difference in the page. And then we also have movement impaired users. So those who cannot use a keyboard or a mouse, and they have to rely on other assistive technologies to help browse the web. So with so many different situations, like everyone's situation is a little bit different. So we can only test so much, but often when it comes to testing accessibility, it involves a variety of things. So we have operating systems, like the screen readers on Windows, and the ones available there are different from the one on Mac OS, for example, VoiceOver. So sometimes those like don't have expected behavior. Browsers also have different APIs in terms of like how screen readers read them, and then tools like just the screen reader in general. That's just like an example of with screen readers. So we have to test like a lot of these different combinations. And it can get pretty, there can be a lot of different ones. So while it's hard, we do want to build a web that is inclusive of as many people as possible. So let's look at a quick example. I'll close out of this first. And I have set up a quick, I never know how to pronounce this, Replit, something like that. But yeah, this is a cool little web app that helps you sort of demo or like prototype something pretty quickly. So we can see here pretty clearly we have a button here and we have a link here. So let's open this up in a new tab. And what I want you guys to think about is, first of all, do we know what this button does? Like, if I click on it, do we know what it's going to do? Will it make something pop up on my page? Will it bring up a modal, or will it do something else? So let's test it out. If you didn't see the code already, you didn't already figure it out, this will open a new link to the nwplus.io webpage. But we didn't know that until we actually clicked on it. And there's no way for us to know what it will do until we click on it. In comparison, we have a link here. And if you, it might be small on the screen, but in the very bottom left, you can see how there's a preview of the link. So it says, this link will bring you to https nwplus.io. So if we click on this, we see that's exactly what we expect. So the difference here is in how these elements are rendered. So if we go back to the code, we can see from lines 11 to 18, we've defined this as a button. And if you're, so this is written in React, but if you're not familiar with it, don't worry. This example is pretty straightforward, but we have this on-click handler, and here we'll call this function called visit URL, and this will run the JavaScript API sort of thing called window.open, and this will open the defined link or address in a new tab. And then in comparison, we have this anchor tag here, which is basically a link element in HTML. And we see we've defined this href as this link, and then the target is equal to _blank. So that's just like saying to open it up in a new tab. So back to the slides. So what did we see? Again, to reiterate, we have no idea where the first button will take us, or if it's even a link at all. So again, I mentioned it could open up a modal, it could do something else. It's kind of dangerous if you're not really sure, you don't really trust where this button's coming from. So what this leads back is we shouldn't be trying to hijack features or MacGyver them into elements that are already available in HTML. So why would we use a button as a link when we already have a link element available? And to sort of compound on that, buttons typically represent JavaScript behavior that exists on the page. So it's an interactive element. And as sort of like a final point, I think some of you might be familiar with this, but you can style a link to be button-like. So let's go back to the Replit and see that. So I'll just uncomment this. And this should refresh. Okay, so we're back here. So if we hover over this, we see we kind of have the quote unquote best of both worlds. We have a button, something that looks like a button, and it also has the link preview in the bottom right. And if we open up DevTools, we can actually see, yeah, this is an anchor element. So is this good? Well, I don't have a strict answer here. It really depends on your sort of opinion on it. So whether you agree with the third point here that buttons should represent just JavaScript behavior and they should do that, that's one thing, but having a link be styled a button-like is probably a good medium there. So that brings us into HTML semantics. So we're going to start from the building blocks of web development, which is HTML. And a good rule of thumb that I've come up with is if your website had no CSS and no JavaScript, so both of those were disabled, then would somebody still be able to use it? So going back to the button example, for the first button where we called a JavaScript function, in that case, we wouldn't be able to use it as a link because we don't have a JavaScript. But in the second example, that link would just appear as like a regular Times New Roman link, but we'd still be able to use it to go to nwplus.io. So going back again, good practice is to not hijack elements and use them in an unexpected context. Another example could be styling a divider as a button. So you can just like add that and then add an on-click handler to a divider. But in that case, why would you not just use a button? This example is pretty egregious, but let's consider something a little bit closer to what we might actually do. So you can see I have a link to a bad example. So that's this one. So we'll open this up in a new tab, and we can see this is a pretty standard website. I wouldn't say it's anything cutting edge, but quick website. And we can see we have 2 pictures here, and then we have what looks like a list and an extra paragraph down here. When we go back to the code, we can see I've just completely used divs and image elements here. And I've sort of hijacked the appearance of a header by applying a manual font size and font weight to it. And that way I've sort of mimicked it, but let's see why this is not good. So we lose a lot of structure when this happens. So aside from the code just being more difficult to read and figure out exactly what's going on, like if your code is entirely just divs, how do you know like which part is actually relevant as a header and which part is just text? We don't really know. There is no content hierarchy. So to sort of describe how this sounds like to screen readers, it's as if you're reading a textbook that has no division of chapters or headings that guide you. So it's just one big blob of text. So let's actually see how someone with a screen reader would interpret this page. So fingers crossed that audio is fine on my end, but I'll double check in Zoom. Okay, share computer's sound looks good. Okay, so I'm gonna turn on screen reader for Mac OS. So
welcome to VoiceOver. VoiceOver speaks descriptions of items on the screen and can be used to control the computer using only your keyboard.
Okay, can everyone
If you
hear
already
that?
know
Maybe
how to
someone
use
with a thumbs up, just to make sure that's
press
working.
the V key now.
Excellent, awesome.
If you want to learn how to use VoiceOver, press the
so
space.
We'll use VoiceOver.
VoiceOver on Chrome, Replit, Google Chrome, Kevin, nwPlus.io, window, accessible development,
I think
Google Slides tab, accessible, close, Replit, selected, tab, Chrome has new window.
Basically,
you are currently on a in Replit, interact, stop interacting with the title of button, space, selected. You are currently on a text element inside of web content. To introduction, my website.
All right, okay.
You are currently on a text element inside of web content. To exit this web area, press Control Option. Is VoiceOver Mac OS or a Chrome extension?
1 second. All right. Oh, sorry. VoiceOver Mac OS is a native thing for Mac OS. So you can activate it on your own by doing a Command F5, I believe. And yeah, so let's go through the site and figure it out. So if you thought the noise...
everyone. Oh, okay, thanks.
Awesome. Okay, we've been hearing a lot of VoiceOver. Thank you. Basically, this is what I was doing a lot of at my work. So I'd spend like 2 hours at a time just listening to this voice. But yeah, okay, so let's go through the page. So we'll start at the top.
My website. You are currently on a text element inside of web content. To exit this web area, press Control Option Shift up arrow.
Okay, so the VoiceOver command to start like parsing a website or just going through it is Control Option A by default. So just press that.
My website. Introduction. Hello everybody, welcome to my website. I like cats and dogs. Here are some pictures of them. To get missing image descriptions, open the context menu. Unlabeled image, /cute-kitten.jpg, unlabeled image, another section. Some of my favorite things are sushi, ramen, video games, sports, hiking, ending lists. Here's another thing though. You are currently on a text element inside of web content. To exit this web area, press Control Option Shift up arrow.
Oh, I just realized this is not here. Okay, sorry, I'll put this here for next time. But yeah, so that's VoiceOver. So you can sort of see it just like went through everything. I didn't really have like a clear structure to it. So let's try it out with another example.
Edit text, blank. At Kevin 06, no notifications, open in a new tab.
Okay.
Heading level 1, my website.
So we'll start here and then we'll just press the start key again.
Heading level 1, my website. Heading level 2, introduction. Hello everybody, welcome to my website. I like cats and dogs. Here are some pictures of them. A picture of a puppy sitting in a field image. A picture of a kitten standing in grass image. Heading level 2, another section. Some of my favorite things are, list 6 items, sushi, ramen, video games, sports, hiking, ending lists. You are currently on a text element. Heaven to everyone. Whoa, that's neat. It can recognize the images.
And you can also see VoiceOver will interrupt you whenever you get a notification. Awesome. And actually, that's a nice comment that you have, Evan, because let me turn off VoiceOver first.
VoiceOver off.
Okay, because it actually doesn't recognize images. So there are tools out there that do have like AI detection for it. But if we look into the code for this actual instance, we see, first off, the code looks a little bit more structured. I'll actually put them side by side so we can compare them. So sorry, I'll make this a little bit bigger. Okay, so instead of just having a bunch of divs, we have actual semantic meaning to our code. So we see this is H1, this is H2, heading 1, heading 2. Then we have a paragraph text. And the text that VoiceOver was reading is actually from this alt attribute on the image. So this is sort of one facet of accessibility, is making sure your images are readable from screen readers. So I don't know if anyone remembers from the first time when we went over this version on the left, but it said like undefined image or like unlabeled image. And that's because we didn't have an alt label here. But in this case, we do. So it's able to read out those. And having descriptive images here helps as well, because let's say, for example, we lose the image on the server. So this is gone. Wait, I'll rename it so that I can have it later. Okay. So let's say this is gone. So we'll run this again. And we see, even if the image is gone, we still have some description of it. So even if you're not using a screen reader, you're still able to tell, oh, there was supposed to be an image here and it was supposed to be a puppy sitting in a field. In comparison, if we did that here, it's just this broken image length thing. So not really too descriptive and doesn't really help too much. So there that is. Okay, let's get back to the slides. So we went over, first of all, the code just being more difficult to read, and then also screen readers having a harder time with it. So what are our key takeaways here? Well, we should write and structure our code in a way that makes logical sense, not only just so that a screen reader can make sense of it, it's also beneficial to us. In general, using HTML elements for the intended purpose and adhering to a well-structured layout will bring you a long way toward accessibility. So examples are not hijacking code or hijacking text elements to be different font sizes or to be like severely different font sizes when you already have existing ones for that. And yeah, you can also go further as well. So with HTML5, there was the introduction of elements such as header, main, footer, and nav. And those provide landmarks for screen readers to use. So incorporating those into your code also help. And an example of that is, I'm going to sell out really quickly and go to my website, and we'll turn on screen reader.
Welcome to VoiceOver.
Sorry,
VoiceOver speaks descriptions of items on the screen and can be used.
VoiceOver on Chrome, home vertical line, Kevin Zhu, Google Chrome, Kevin, nwPlus. Kevin, selected. Okay. You are currently on end of net link, navigation, visited link, Kevin.
Okay. So we're on this site, and what we can do is we can press the VoiceOver key plus U to
Links
go to
menu.
Rotary or Rotor.
Visited link. Kevin Zhu out. You are currently on a link inside of web content.
I'm trying to drag it onto
links menu.
Oh, there we go. Okay, sweet. So we can see here, there is a pretty easy way to navigate sites. So even if you're at the bottom of a web page and you want to go back to the links section at the top, you don't want to have to go through every single element on your way up. So you can use this UI.
Visited link, block link, heading level, visited link,
various
link,
links.
visited
Or you can
link,
also
headings
go to
menu,
different headings.
heading, no items in landmarks menu, navigation.
This is an example of where the nav, the nav element comes into play. So if you're at the bottom of the page, you can open up this UI and then go to the navigation menu.
Link, blog.
It would automatically.
You are currently on a link.
Here.
To click this link, press Control Option Space. Blog.
Here.
Kevin Zhu.
Anyways,
VoiceOver off.
Let's go back to the slides and talk about other considerations. So now that we've covered sort of the semantic meaning of HTML and how we should use that best, let's talk about this, but not before I have some water. Also, make sure to stay hydrated. So if you don't have a cup of water with you, you can go grab some right now. But we'll keep chugging along. So the first thing I want to bring up is color contrast. So in the chat, or maybe with a thumbs up, if you think this is accessible, put a thumbs up. And if you think it isn't, a thumbs up or yes in chat. And if you think it's not accessible, then say no in chat or give an alternative react. And I'll give us like a couple seconds to do that. Thank you, Evan. All right. So it turns out this is not accessible, at least if it's normal text. If it's large text, we see it actually does pass. So the reason is the contrast here is not high enough. So I think the contrast level between the two colors has to be at least 4.5 in order for it to be accessible by WCAG AA standards, and it has to be at least 7 for AAA. But yeah, it gets complicated and it gets weird. You're not really sure at which point it is accessible and which one it isn't. So there is like a lot of thought that has to be put into color contrast. So it's not just a code thing either, it's also design. So if you're making graphics and stuff, it's important to keep this in mind as well. And then, so I mentioned that. And here's another example. So on the left side, we see how this metro map looks like to someone without color blindness, and then to someone with it, it's pretty hard to tell the different lines apart. So even if something looks fine to us, it might not look fine to someone else. Next up, I want to talk about ARIA and WAI-ARIA. So ARIA stands for Accessible Rich Internet Applications. And basically the use of this is it provides a bunch of HTML attributes to label interactive elements that are ambiguous. So ARIA label is a common one example for icon buttons. So if we go back to the button example, I have this ARIA label here. And let's see how this sounds without ARIA label. So turn on VoiceOver.
Welcome to VoiceOver. VoiceOver speaks descriptions of items on the screen and can be used to control the computer using only your keyboard.
Zoom share toolbar window system dialog main. Who knows what this button does? Button. Visited link. We do know this.
Thank you, VoiceOver. Okay.
Who knows what this button does? Button.
Okay.
You are currently on a button. To click this button, press.
Okay, so basically we're on this button and it just reads out the text on the button, but we still have no idea what this button does. If you're a developer and you want to, for some reason, you want the text to be ambiguous in this sense, what we can
Isaac
do is,
Chung has joined the meeting.
Thanks, Isaac.
VoiceOver off.
What you can do is you can add this ARIA label, and we'll wait for this to reload. And it'll turn back on Voice Reader.
VoiceOver on Chrome, VOD app, Google Chrome, Kevin, nwPlus. Entering VOD app web content. This button opens the nwPlus website in a new tab. Button main. You are currently on a button.
So we can see from that description, it tells us that, oh, this button opens the nwPlus webpage in a new tab. So that's sort of one way that you can help
VoiceOver off.
Make your buttons more accessible, especially if this is like a weird example because it already has text. But if you ever have like an icon button, then that'd be like a good time to use ARIA labels. Then there's also WAI-ARIA, which you just tack on Web Accessibility Initiative on top of ARIA, and it introduced the role attribute. So you can add this attribute to your HTML elements, and that will help you define landmarks. So landmarks are, if you remember like that floating modal in the middle of the screen, that has like a landmark section, and it enables you to sort of jump from parts of the page that are important. So for example, if you're like a library catalog website, you probably want to have a landmark on your search box because that's a pretty common feature for libraries. And then ARIA label is built in. So all of this is native to HTML. And last but not least, there's keyboard accessibility and controls. So now that we've kind of gone over a bunch of different stuff, we went over HTML semantics and how that works, and then color contrast and how screen readers work. Let's talk about action items. First off, I have a video of how accessibility development does not work. Sorry, the volume is a little bit low. I'll restart.
How can we protect ourselves? I got it! Let's all buy a Krabby Patty! We should lock our doors!
We should call my nephew.
We should dig a moat! We should take Bikini Bottom and push it somewhere else!
All right. So as you probably heard, there's a lot of different options that we can take towards accessibility, but there isn't one good way. Oh, sorry, not this again. Sorry. So there isn't one good way of just like taking a website and pushing it all the way to accessibility. There's like a lot of different things you need to put into it. So how can we start? A little bit of a preface here. The topic of accessibility is vast, and while it's daunting to figure out where you should start, the most important thing, and I hope the one takeaway you get from this workshop, is that you should just start thinking about it. Thinking about it and keeping that in mind while you're developing already plays a big part because it like shows that you have that intent to do that. In terms of the actual action items, what we can do is perform audits on our web apps to find out which issues already exist. So you can use tools to sort of like go through your entire web app and point out, oh, like this text doesn't have enough contrast, or this image doesn't have an ARIA label, sort of that sort of stuff. So that's a retroactive response to it. And sorry, we can also proactively identify accessibility issues during development. So we can use like developer plugins and tools to enforce ally rules, such as ESLint plugins, and also this Axe core testing engine. So one quick thing, like sort of tip before we finish off, I think we're almost done, is if you want to have like a quick and easy way of checking some accessibility, what you can do is open up developer tools, and with this element selector, you can actually see there's an accessibility tab. So it'll tell you like contrast and a bunch of other stuff that helps you towards making sure your website's accessible. So if you need a quick and easy color contrast checker, then this is one. And then we also see for this image, we see there is a name for it. So a picture of a puppy sitting in a field. So yeah, quick tip if anyone wanted to get started with that. But yeah, I think that's pretty much it. So with that, it is stamp time. For those who are not too familiar, basically at our hackathons, we typically have stamps to give out. So I think in Accessible Dev Banter, there should be a message that you react to within 300 seconds. And I don't know, what was the password for this one? Let me check. Or does anyone know off the top of their head for the TAs? Oh, there's no password. Sorry, my bad. Yes, there's a stamp, and basically you have to react to it. And in terms of what stamps do, I think we do a raffle based on the stamps, but someone correct me if I'm wrong as well. But yeah, there's that. When all's said and done, thank you so much for being a friend and coming along to listen on this sort of brief introduction to accessibility. I hope you enjoy the rest of the workshops at nwHacks and also the actual hackathon this weekend. Before I sort of open up the questions, we are having our next workshop at 7 p.m. I think, and I'll be Git 101 and Git 201. So if you want an introduction to Git or you want to learn some more Git, then that's going to be a great workshop to go to. I think I'll also be TAing that one as well. So there's that. But thanks for tuning in. And if anyone has any questions, feel free to raise your hand and unmute or put it in the chat. Yeah, I believe so. Yeah. For getting a stamp on just by reacting. Yeah, no problem. And if you ever want to like chat or anything, I think my Discord handle is just Kevo with the nwPlus tag on it. So you can just find me that way or whatever. But yeah, farewell, everyone. Have a great dinner, or depending on what time zone you are, great rest of your day. And yeah, we'll see you around.